Hey everybody, it's Clint Powell, and today's episode is brought to you by two great sponsors. One is my friends at JB Millworks. Jeremy Price and his staff do wonderful work. I'm going to tell you how to get a hold of them first. jbmillworks.com, or you can call them at 706-965-6940. And then I'm going to tell you why. You ready? They have great products. They have doors, they have stair parts, trim work, anything you're wanting for remodel or new construction. But they also have beautiful plantation shutters, make your house look gorgeous, and high quality, energy saving, gorgeous, beautiful sun-clad windows. I know a little bit about sun-clad windows. I know the owner of the company, Frank Anderson, and I'm telling you right now, if you have a home and you're wanting to get the best of both worlds, high energy savings and yet a beautiful wood look on the interior, it is gorgeous inside and outside wood-clad windows from Sun Windows. jbmillworks.com or 706-965-6940. Also, a sponsor of today's episode is Lori Monteith with Keller Williams, or as she is known on Facebook and Google, Team Monteith. Lori started in the real estate industry back when everybody was getting out of it with the great economic downturn. She made the most of it. She pulled through. She does business the right way. And in a world where there's all these multiple offers, houses are not staying on the market long, you're wanting to move or you're wanting to sell, you need someone who has a track record of getting things done. Find out more about her. Team Monteith is on Facebook. You can also Google Lori Monteith, but you can call them at 315-0042, 423-315-0042, or you can find out more at findchattanoogarealestate.com. Enjoy today's episode. Hey folks, Clint Powell here. This is During the Break. Let's do this. Hey, welcome to During the Break podcast. Thank you for finding us. Do what I always ask you to do. Rate, review us. Things that help us grow this podcast. Today, I feel pretty lucky. I got two friends in here. I know from different ways and through life. I'm lucky enough to have smart people feel sorry for me, befriend me, proverbial arm around the shoulder. It's going to be okay. And I've got two of them in here. They've each been on the podcast separately, and we've talked about different things. And it hit me about 5 or 6 months ago to get them on the air to talk about different stuff. Education, politics, some business advice, history. So stick around. You're going to love the conversation. And just so you understand, it was one of those when I would ask them, hey, are y'all available this date? And I would get, I am this date, I am this date. Okay, how about this date? And it was a tennis match of availability. And finally, I landed on today, which I'm very lucky. Eric Buchanan, a local ERISA attorney. Did I get that right, sir?
Yep, you got it.
Are you just an attorney? Do I have to throw the word ERISA in there?
ERISA helps. How about disabled attorney? Helping disabled people get their benefits, mostly from insurance companies.
Yeah, see, he said it better than I did. I was going to stick with attorney. And Tim Kelly, owner of Kelly Subaru. All right, well, hold on a second. Let me get my list together. Owner of Kelly Subaru, Chattanooga Honda. Is it Honda Power Sports?
Southern Honda Power Sports.
Southern Honda Power Sports. And you're a part owner with the Chattanooga Soccer, CFC? Are you the?
Yep. I'm the chairman of the club and a part owner. We got like 2,800 owners now, though.
Oh, because you just went, you did what the Green Bay Packers are doing.
We did, yeah.
How's that going? That's an update, because that was last year. That was 2018. It
closes June 1st. I don't know when you're going to air this, but it closes June the 1st, and we're up to about $750,000. Well, 2,700 investors from all 50 states and 25 countries around the world.
So these podcasts are evergreen, so people can listen to them. So it's 2019, and we're a week away from June 1st.
Right.
Pretty close to it.
Yep.
I know it sounds like a success to me. Is that success to you guys?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Pretty pumped?
It's a success, yeah.
Yeah.
The legal cap's $1 million, and, obviously that's our HAG, but we internally we said if we hit $500,000, that'd be a huge deal.
So you're far exceeded.
We are, and that's great.
So what does that, real quick, before we start doing the conversation, what does that, how do you do that? Is there a platform for that? Do they get shares? How does that work?
They get shares. I mean, so it's really interesting. The Jobs Act passed in late 2016, I think it was, had a lot of different elements of it, but one of which was equity crowdfunding is what it's called. So think of it as GoFundMe, but it's not just a donation. You're buying equity. The idea was to try to open up public capital for Main Street, right? So normally if you had a company and you wanted to go raise public capital, you do an IPO. Well, and you list your shares on the stock exchange. And buddy, let me tell you something. If you ever had a company, that's the holy grail, because then the shares get bid on. It becomes like a poker game, and up goes the value, and the cap value of your company just went through the roof.
Right.
So this, although the shares aren't publicly traded, it's a way for companies to access public capital. But it's very, very, prescribed the way in which it's done, because these are registered SEC, securities, regulated, but it has to be done through an approved platform, meaning a website. Essentially, the one we did it through was WeFunder. So you just go to this website, and all the prospectus and all the investment details are there. And yeah, you're buying shares of the company.
It's two silly questions. Can you do this again? Can you do another round down the road?
You can do one every year. Now, we don't plan to do that. But I mean, if you had a bakery or a brewery or a car dealership, in theory, that people felt, personally committed to enough, they could do it. I mean, do a law firm if you wanted.
Well, and that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, you can't do a law firm. Can't be an owner of a law firm if you don't have a law license.
Well, there you have. Well,
so
I stand corrected.
Which brings up my question. So my wife's an owner of the Green Bay Packers. I bought her those shares a few years ago. For you guys, for that football club, for that soccer league, are there any restrictions on ownership, or if somebody bought those shares, could they turn around and sell them to a non-relative?
They are restricted in the sense that transfers restricted as of this point, just because we don't have the administrative back office to shuffle shares. So they are somewhat restricted. They're very much like the Packer shares. They're transferable to family members. Direct family members. That's how it's written.
Gotcha.
Currently.
The things that I've noticed about since you started that campaign, and I think it's just as valuable as a little from outside looking in. I was gonna say as the money, not to you guys. You're like, yeah, the money's pretty valuable, but it's the excitement and the energy that kind of campaign has generated. Because there's a lot of maybe intentional or unintended positive consequences of those kind of things. Attendance, brand awareness,
engagement. We like to say, because it's the difference between dating and marriage. It's like, when you own a part of the club, however small, it feels different when it's your club.
And driving around the neighborhoods and seeing the owner signs in friends' front yard, hey, those people are owners too. Yeah, that's great top of mind awareness for you guys. Yeah. That's seriously,
and you don't just brush over the headlines anymore. I mean, you may be you may go to some of the soccer games, and you're proud to have a team like this in your area, your community. But now those headlines, when you're an owner, you stop, you read. Yep. You want to know what's going on with who? Your team.
We actually had somebody come to our game Saturday night that got so caught up. It was a big game. We don't have time to probably go into all that, but they invested $5,000.
Wow.
Yeah. After seeing the game and just getting lit up by the whole thing. Yeah.
Wow. Well, let's just jump off right there. History. It's funny when I brought Eric in, and so I played rugby with Eric, and so
see where you two boys might be, good at rugby. Yeah.
So Eric starts when I sit down. He goes, before you got here, Tim. I said, hey, Tim's going to be on, and I was telling Katie, he's part owner of the CFC, and Eric goes, we might talk the history of soccer here in Chattanooga, and I giggled, and I went, ha, 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 and he goes, no, seriously, and you have a history of soccer. You came from California where everybody played soccer.
Yeah, so I grew up here on Signal Mountain, but I didn't actually move here till fourth grade. So we lived in Thousand Oaks for a couple of years before we moved here. And soccer there was like Little League. I played baseball and soccer were the two sports you played in third and fourth grade. Thousand Oaks, California had 70,000 people, 10,000 people, kids and adults, played organized soccer. So I moved to Chattanooga thinking, where am I signed up to play soccer? And there was no Little League. There was nothing at school except the YMCA had started some teams. So we played with the Downtown YMCA League, and it was kids from Thrasher, basically, was the team that I played with. But there was no other soccer than that. Then when I got into Signal Mountain Junior High, I actually helped some other guys, and we got together and started a club team that ended up traveling around and playing Hickson and going to Knoxville and playing some teams. And when I got to Red Bank, we had a club team. I did 3 sports at Red Bank. I did cross country in the fall, indoor track, and outdoor track, because we didn't have a soccer team, but I tried to play the soccer club sport on top of doing those 3 sports. Finally, my senior year, we got a soccer team at Red Bank, so I got to play on the first ever.
When did you graduate?
Soccer team, 85.
Okay.
And we got 3rd in the state.
Yeah, I met the coach the other day. He was at an event. I can't remember the fellow's name, but he was the first coach at Red Bank. And he said he started out and didn't know a thing about soccer and kind of picked it up. And
he was a science teacher.
Yeah. One of the great experiences of his life.
And
that's fantastic.
And Tim, you were saying you read headlines or something that soccer has been around in Chattanooga even, right?
Oh, yeah.
A lot longer than a lot of our brains go back 10 years now, or 5 years.
I'll try to keep this brief, but interesting tie back to rugby. The sports have the exact same origin. So it turns out they used to just play with a ball on a field. And basically,
are we going to talk about Webb Ellis making it a bear game?
Well, not quite.
We're not there yet.
But my point was, you had association football, which became soccer, which is where I get the word soccer, and rugby football, which of course became rugby. And it's just how the rules that they played at rugby school, where association football was played elsewhere. And so they started as the same game. Then, of course, American football branched off of rugby football later. But, they were playing soccer in the United States in the 1890s. I do, sometimes these kind of civic club presentations, and I have a slideshow about it. But great trivia question is the first champions of American soccer, American professional soccer, you know who it was?
Mm-mm.
The Baltimore Orioles. Because the old school baseball teams were playing soccer in the off season to keep their guys in shape. No lie. But it was like 1893 or something like that.
Look at that.
They beat the Washington Nationals, the old original team, in the championship. And of course they quit, but and so soccer has come and gone, but it's been around in one form or the other.
It's tried
for a long time.
Well, and I used to say this all the time. To me, the two best athletes that adapt to rugby the best in my world were soccer players, because they're used to running, they're used to their feet, they're used to spacing, and they're used to that kind of stuff. And wrestlers. And the reason wrestlers were always great is because they're just crazy. I mean, there's no fear. They're used to one-on-one guys wanting to really crank on them. Right. And you're telling me I just got to run into that dude or run away from him? I'm cool with that. I'm fine. But they had that. You come from a traditional American or football background. And my first game I played, we were playing up at Swanee, and I got knocked out of bounds, and I made a good hit, but I got out of bounds. And I was like, I got up, I jacked that guy up, and everybody's mad at me because when you go out of bounds, you lose the ball. Right. It's a turnover. Yeah. And I was trying not to block. Right. Hey, that's a good way to get beat up really fast when you start blocking in rugby. But yeah, I thought it was ironic that you played your history, Eric, was that much in soccer. So it's pretty good.
Soccer first, rugby later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Rugby was the adult sport.
Well, and hey, listen, I got a buddy of mine, Josh McClan, who played for the Chattanooga, what do you call him? One of the leagues. He played adult soccer. He's 40 now, 42, 43. But up until just 5 or 6 years ago, he was playing all the time.
I still play.
He played all the time.
So I can play. I'm 52, but I still play on. I play on a team with kids it's an open team. And this guy, I say every year is gonna be my last, but I play on. They're younger than my kids. And they're hitting the ball, hard. And my wrists and my fingers, I don't know how much longer I can do it. But it's fun. It keeps you young. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It keeps you young. Yep. And, when you were bringing up the soccer and we were talking rugby, and I've said this 100 times, and I wish we could find a way to make it work. But I think if we ever want to take, and this is the serious part of the conversation, I really think that if rugby in Chattanooga or whatever, you can be listening to this in any city, rugby's got that in between. Soccer's got some legitimacy to it because it's taken more serious now, because you got lacrosse and these sports that were once kind of put in the shadows. Now they're coming. And if rugby ever wants to get to that point, they have to almost, I think, take the approach that you and your team did for soccer.
Well, I didn't come here to do this, but you heard it here first. We've been working with Chattanooga Rugby for a while on a plan for Montague. To put fields in there that would be dual purpose for rugby and soccer both, and put a pavilion and fill that out. We're working with the city to try to develop a plan and raise the money to do it. So I think
my son
would be great.
Started rugby this year. Yeah. So I was watching him, and I was talking Jack Head and a lot of those guys, and he said that y'all had worked on something. I just didn't know where it was in the planning stage.
We're cranking away at it.
That's killer. Yep. That's good stuff. All right, so now look at this, marking soccer off my list to talk about things to get. So one of the things that I think, there's four or five topics I want to talk about, but one of the things that when I was talking to you, Eric, and talking to you, Tim, that I knew that there was passion about, and I put this umbrella of politics out there, but more specifically, stuff like education. All right, so real quick, you're not on the board. Or do you sit on the board? Education. You don't sit on the board of education.
Oh no, that's an elected board. Yeah. You mean the school board?
Yeah, school board.
I've never been on the school board. No, I'm on this kind of informal budget working group. Group.
You're in the news every now and then. It's not too informal.
Well, because it was organized by a public policy guy named David Eichenthal to try to bring business leaders together to look at the budget and figure out how does this thing need to be recast for success? Because it's no secret that in the past it has been a bit of a leaky bucket. So we issued a report right about the time Brian Johnson was coming on, and to his credit, he really has used that as a blueprint to try to institute reform, both in the front office with a new executive team, and with a lot of different policies. So have been working on it pretty much steadily ever since, just to try to figure out how we advance it. Because my personal belief is that it is the keystone issue in Chattanooga as to whether we're going to move forward or fall back.
Hey, folks, don't forget this episode is brought to you by JB Millworks, jbmillworks.com. I had you on the podcast, I don't know, last year sometime, and I talked to you generally about education. But where do you think, because I don't think anybody would disagree that there have been wrong turns taken at Albuquerque at some point in time, you know, the old reference to the cartoon there. Is it too top-heavy? Did we try to raise kids instead of teach kids?
I went into it thinking it was going to be too top heavy. What we found in the first budget working group report is that the front office was actually understaffed.
That would surprise a lot of people.
I know, but I'm telling you, that's what we found. Now, but not only was it understaffed, arguably, and this is probably going to make some people mad, the wrong people in those chairs. And so one of the first things Brian did was go out and hire a new, in the corporate world, we'd say a C-suite, but a new chief business officer, a new head of HR. He brought in, Brent Goldberg to be the new CFO. And so a lot of that stuff is just better management of resources and personnel. And and the difference is already there is a big difference. I think and that's the problem. I see a lot of stuff, because I'm looking at it all the time, that casual, the normal voter here wouldn't see. Where they think this has just been money down a hole for a long time. It's not anymore. It's not business as usual.
Well, and it may be money down the hole, like you said, but just invest with people who are above their skis or over their skis,
right,
as far as job descriptions go. Yeah. And both of you have hired people. Both of you have employed people. Both of you have consulted with other places. And education is the keystone. But if you have someone in the wrong chair, all the other small problems that you can navigate are become glaring.
Well, not only glaring, they compound, because you don't have a smart enough person at the head to be able to spot the mistake. So then it just
and have the courage to change it.
Right.
That's the other part.
Having the courage to change it. I say all the time, you can't pay enough for the right people, and you can't get rid of the wrong people fast enough. And so
maybe that's why I've been fired so fast a lot of times.
Maybe you were just around pegging a square hole.
Never afford to pay you what you're worth. Yeah, that's really what it is.
Thank you, Eric
You're
Buchanan.
worth so much they can't afford what. Yeah. So as an outsider, not completely an outsider, I don't have kids.
Yeah.
I did go to public schools here in Hamilton County. I've got plenty of nieces, nephews, friends that go to school around here, that teach around here. So there's some success stories. Howard High School seems to have changed a little bit. The new academies over at what used to be the
Temple.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's Blaine Swalford.
Those
CGLA.
Those are going to be really, really interesting. And some of the other magnet schools we've got that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the fights now in the Tennessee legislature is that they're trying to kind of do a voucher system.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, we hear people that are still complaining about the mandates that are coming down from the federal level. So you have looked at this stuff a little bit more in depth than I have. So I'm going to ask about those two competing things.
Mm-hmm.
How much more does there need to be some freedom for people to start more schools and have a voucher system and have some of those magnet school type of schools compete a little bit more? Maybe even a private school, you can use the voucher,
right,
if that's going to work, versus how effective is it to have the standardized test to make sure that the kids are learning certain things and they actually can live up to it? Or how much of those mandates get in the way?
I mean, my sense is, again, I looked at it from a business perspective. I try to stay out of the academic stuff. I mean, I am kind of an academic. But it's just not what we were convened to look at, right? My sense is, from my teacher friends, you've got them too, is that they don't like the national standards, and they feel like it makes them teach to the test and all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, I think you have to have some level of benchmarking to say, who knows what's going on? Like, for example, I've spent a fair amount of time in Argentina, and the Argentine school system is a disaster. They spend a lot of money on it. I'm going to make some people mad in Argentina now. But you go and talk to a lot of folks in Argentina, they look busy. They're doing all kinds of stuff, but it's very politicized, And unless the school system is producing outcomes that are measurable and useful, then there has to be some part of that.
I think we teaching to the test. I love the way you said that, because I almost feel that's what we're doing nowadays, and we've boxed good teachers, right. and I think I look at the system. It's almost like politics. Yeah. It's like big business. Mm-hmm. You can take a good person, put them in a system that's broken. They cannot hold back the tide forever.
No.
And eventually they either become part of the system and just do the best they can, or they leave the system. And if you're teaching to pass tests, you're not teaching to learn.
Exactly. So there's form and content, right? And content is like, who was the first president of the United States? I mean, that stuff's maybe important, but the more important thing is not to learn facts, but to learn how to think, like to learn to think critically.
Critical thinking.
And that's a really difficult thing to measure. It's almost always subjective, right? So it's a difficult thing to standardize, but that's what's more important. I was lucky enough to be the mentor in the Principal Leadership Academy for a guy named Jim David, who's the assistant principal at STEM school at Chattanooga State. Man, I was so impressed with what they're doing at that school and the STEM method. It's not just science, technology, engineering, math as much as it is a way of thinking and a way of approaching problem solving that to me is that model needs to spread, because nobody knows what the future of work's going to look like. Nobody knows. But one thing's for sure, you need employees who can accept accountability and figure stuff out. Yeah. And if a person can do that, I can teach them to do anything.
Well, and I hate to say this, but we throw politics into everything nowadays. Yeah. I think politics has gotten into everything we do so much that it's the gum inside the wheel. It's the gum in the gears.
Yeah.
Because now when you talk school systems, it's all politics. Even there's political correctness. We go, when you say things like just teach them how to read, write, and arithmetic, you sound old and cranky. But there's also part of that is that process of teaching them that used to be the critical thinking part.
All right.
There was a component in that of accountability. We used to fail kids.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they still do that. Yeah. I don't know if people can still fail in the public school system.
Yeah, no, I think they can. I think the problem is then what? You just ship them straight to jail because you might as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the real problem.
Listen, I got beat up by a guy that was failed twice in 7th grade, so I'm a little bitter, okay? He was shaving. There's no way that guy should have been in 7th grade. He took my lunch money all the time.
Part of what's in the budget, and I did a radio show with Jim Place the other day, and you can imagine how that went about this topic, but it actually came out fine, because part of what's in the budget right now is for behavioral support. And you go, for crying, eyes start rolling. Like, why can't you just teach kids, right? Because those disruptive kids, a lot of times, have got problems at home, emotional problems, whatever. They've been whooped up on by their mom or dad, or there's some kind of issue. I mean, again, what are you going to do with the kid? Do you ship him into? Do you put him in? You got to do something.
You're going to spend money on him somewhere.
You're going to spend money on him somewhere.
So what's in that program? What do they do for those kids?
They kind of, I guess they're kind of like shrinks. I guess they kind of sit them down and try to figure out what's going on, try to get them right on get them on a good track so that they can sort of get back in the classroom and hopefully learn, and at the very least not be disruptive. So,
and if the answer is I can't concentrate because I'm hungry,
then
make sure they get on the voucher program.
That's definitely
school breakfast. I don't even know how all that stuff works anymore.
I honestly do not either. I can't say I can go that far into it.
I've said this to both y'all on the individual podcast, and I said on the radio show I do with Rich Mazingo a lot of times, Marketing Mix Radio. We can go back. You know how it's one of those arguments where as soon as we agree on something, we'll talk about a cause, and then that cause has a cause, and it's almost like the Pez dispenser of the reasons why. And so we can agree, and then we can agree. But we're always going to go back to a root cause. I still think the root cause of the educational system and most all problems we have comes from the breakdown of family.
I think you're probably right.
It comes from, I hate to be mean to us dads, but men just walking off.
Yeah.
And so if you talk about the way we were raised, our parents were pretty active. Mm-hmm. I feel like I say this all the time. I'm paying for an education a lot of times that I got through the public education system because we went to the schools we lived in around the communities. We cared about the stuff we threw on the yard. We cared about things. Yeah. And I think sometimes from what you just told me, the school system now is expected to do what the parents used to do. If we're upset with that, that's our fault, not the school system.
Well, to an extent, that is the case. And so, what I will hear from I'm a white conservative male. Most of my friends live out in the suburbs, and a lot of white suburban folks are like, "What's the problem?" Right? If you live seriously,
I get it. Yeah.
It's the parent's job. Well, all right. Well, let's say that's not the case, and either it could be Sale Creek, or it could be Alton Park. I mean, it's not a white or black thing. Trust me. You talk to people there. So what are you going to do? Right? So to some extent, the school has to play that role.
Identifying the problem is part of it.
What is the alternative? The alternative is going to be, prison, a minimum wage job at best. I mean, you've got to try. what's your plan? That's what I ask those people. Because
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't be asking what my. Anyway, well, this podcast is to gripe about the problems. I didn't know you were going to start expecting solutions. I got all kinds of problems we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Well, it's the rate of single parenthood and especially moms raising kids has doubled in both the African American and the white community since the 60s. And it's for a lot of reasons. It's not just dads are bad. It's not just men there's a ton of things pulling at that dynamic.
Right.
But at the end of the day, and I say this with YCAP, is the group I help a lot through the boxing program and stuff. We ask a 9-year-old to care about what 5 times 5 plus 4 plus these problems. And he doesn't know if the power's going to be on when he gets home. And mom didn't show up home last night, neither did dad. So what do you do with that group?
What do you do? I mean,
it's where
you get into this discussion about equity, and some people, have a head start, and others need, not every kid needs the same amount of resources to wind up in the same place. So,
and I think sometimes we look at head starts at sometimes. I said this on a podcast. I did a mini one just by myself. If you really want to talk about, privilege, if you were born in the United States, no matter what color you are, welcome to the privileged. Because the poor in America is way better than the rich in a lot of countries.
One thing you haven't addressed yet is the other idea of, are we teaching the right thing to these kids? Does everybody need to fit the same mold?
Right.
I go back to the idea of what we were talking about earlier was when we played soccer, when you and I were kids, where did we play? Well, one of the places was Kirkman.
Right.
Kirkman's not there anymore.
Yep.
Where did the technical kids get their education? I've got friends that are in the trade industry. I've done some work on flipping some old houses. I've done Social Security disability cases for 20 years, so I've talked to a lot of blue-collar workers. And I got a friend, for example, the guy that owned the shoe shop down across the street from the Choo Choo was a buddy of mine. I took him out to play golf a few times, and he went for 15 years trying to find somebody who would take over. It was Kenton's, but he wasn't Kenton.
Yeah.
But it was at Kenton's shoe shine shop. He couldn't find anybody who would take it over. I asked him one time, where'd you learn to be a cobbler? Over at Howard High School back in the 40s or 50s when he was in high school. Nobody teaches that anymore. Right. So where do you get your shoes fixed? There's one place out at the mall. Nobody could ever take over his place. Where are we getting the new guys to fix air conditioners and that learn how to do construction work, that learn those technical trades? Good
luck getting a plumber. A good plumber, if you've got a problem today,
hallelujah.
Good luck getting them there today.
Well, and
there's guys that want to do that work. There's men and women that want to do that kind of work. Where do they get that education until they get out of high school and have to start over?
So you're preaching the choir. We can't find technicians to do work. I mean, we really have to work hard. And those guys are making a lot of money. They're making a lot more money than the salespeople most of the time, and we literally can't consistently. And they can take that toolkit and if I'm not treating them right, they can pull up and go somewhere else and get a job tomorrow. And you're right. So it's not so when Dr. Johnson came in, very shortly thereafter, they came up with this idea of the Future Ready Institutes. And again, the Chamber of Commerce was the main institute that's been behind the Chattanooga 2.0 movement for that reason, because companies came to the Chamber and was like, we can't find employees. This is nuts. So that's happening. And Governor Lee is also a big proponent of vocational education and returning more to that, what is really a European system. The Dutch and the Germans have done it very well for a very long time, where they've got parallel tracks, and they recognize.
Well, they start apprenticeships way earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to college, not everybody wants to go to college. The program that they've got at Gestamp is great. And those kids are in school while they're working, and expanding something like that, I think, has got a lot of promise.
And I want to transition it over to talking history a little bit. We're not unique to this struggle, to this issue when it comes. And this is the more government, the more, and I think there's a fine line between, when I say top heavy, the more opinions you get from different bureaus and all these entities that come in and go, hey, if you want our dollar, you got to do this. And if you want this 50 cents, you need to do that. And the more we do that, I think sometimes people look at it and go, the focus isn't the kids. The focus is where am I going to get the 50 cents?
Right.
And I don't know. I think that problem is not a Chattanooga centric. It's not Atlanta. It's not, it's every community. It's every community.
Yep. And
I think we've lost our voice as the people. A lot of times we've abdicated that authority because we've not, we don't take care of the kids before they get to the school. And we forget sometimes the school has our kids most of the day.
Oh my gosh. So one of the metrics that they did was on the new school budget is the school budget works out to, even with the increase, it works out to $8 an hour per kid.
Per kid per day.
Per day. You can't hire a babysitter for $8.
No.
That's what it costs. That's the new budget, which is, again, about a 10% increase. that they're looking for. $8 an hour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
So I'm doing that math real quick in my head. They're there for what, 6 hours a day
Or
so?
I'm going to screw it up if I say so, but I think that's right.
Well, let's round it off to 6
Yeah.
times 8 is 48.
Yeah.
48 is 180 school days still. Do they still do that?
I think that's right.
So $50 a day times 180 is
4,900, 9,000.
The guy from East Ridge,
Yeah.
he steps out. The
Yeah.
floor is yours,
Yeah.
gentlemen.
about $9,000 a year,
Yeah,
right?
9,000.
Yeah.
So for $9,000 a year, that goes back to what like Senator Mike Bell's proposing is if you give the family a check for $8,000, go find out where you want to go to school. You save $1,000.
And the real problem, my understanding of the reason that they basically passed that bill and accepted Hamilton County, and you got guys like Todd Gardenhire, who is no liberal wallflower, who opposed that simply because it would yank the rug out from under, I think, the momentum that we're making here with the public school system at a time when they need the funding, right? Part of the problem, and this is really getting into the weeds, is that the BEP, which is the formula by which the state, most of the state, a lot of people need to understand this too, the vast majority of funding comes from the state through state sales tax revenue. It comes, the money's collected by the state and then comes back. But the way they allocate it back is this BEP formula. And without getting too deep in the weeds, Hamilton County gets screwed by the BEP. There's actually was a lawsuit pending to try to change it. Again, you can do research all day on the internet about it, but that's more information.
I would love to get Todd or Mike in here or both. That would be a blast to talk about that, go into more detail about how Hamilton County got.
Todd would be your guy more than Mike, I think, but either of them could do it. But Williamson County is a classic example. Ain't nobody crying poor in Williamson County, but because there's so much of that technically is classified as farmland, and because most of the problem in Tennessee has to do with trying to equalize between rural areas and cities, Williamson County looks to the algorithm, to the formula, like a rural county. Well, give me a break, Anyway, you should get Todd in here.
With Todd to be a good one to get in here and talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, before we transition to the next topic, Tim, where did you go to college?
Columbia,
and Eric, you went to?
The Virginia Military Institute.
Because then you went to the Navy as a pilot, and then back to law school.
And then went back to law school.
Thank you for your
years.
service, by the way.
Thank you, appreciate that.
But what was your major?
I was comparative literature, which meant I've cobbled together anthropology, history, religion, and German, basically. Yeah.
So I'm talking to him on my podcast, and then Eric, what was your major?
History.
And I started listening to you talk, and I went, that would be probably really smart if I would ask you a good question and let me shut up and let them talk. Here's the thing that I didn't know. The two things it brought up, and I don't know where this conversation will go about history. One is, I tried a whiskey that you recommended called Hellcat Maggie.
Yeah.
An Irish
Buy it
whiskey.
just for the bottle.
Absolutely. It's a great bottle. And then we were talking about the UT Notre Dame game, football game, right? And so they started having this conversation about there's implications about the whiskey you drink and the color you wear at these football games. And I'm the simpleton over here going, I just like the whiskey.
Yeah.
And I don't like either Notre Dame or Tennessee. Where does Alabama fit in?
Yeah.
And they both ignored me. So what's the deal with the just real quick, we don't have to spend a lot of time. What's the deal with the whiskey? The Jameson versus the Hellcat Maggie?
The first part. So I asked you the question, do you like Jameson or Bushmills better?
Yeah, and I said, I don't know.
Actually, Americans that don't know any better, so which one do you like better? But it actually really matters because Jameson's is made in the Republic, and it is the Irish, you can say Catholic, it's the Irish Republican whiskey.
Yes.
And then Bushmills is made in the North by Protestants, and it's, if you're loyal to the British, you're going to drink Bushmills. If you are a pro-Irish Catholic Republican, you're going to drink Jameson's, and it actually matters if you go to an Irish pub in Ireland, which one you order.
Like you're going to get your ass kicked. If you're not
that just makes me sick because you said Republican, all these Republican, you said all these things. And
the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah, I know, North and South.
Yeah.
You take that and you start using American definitions, you could get really confused really quick.
It's confusing. What's a Provo?
I don't. Let me ask you, what whiskey do you drink when you go over there?
This is a good question.
Hellcat Maggie.
I used to drink Magner's cider is what I drink. I don't like whiskey as much as my
water.
wife does.
Cider's
I drink water.
So then the segue to football is that the Tennessee Notre Dame game, there's all this kind of unconscious history, because Notre Dame's obviously a Catholic school. John Knox, after whose Knoxville's named, was a Scotch Presbyterian, and the color orange, where the University of Tennessee gets its color, comes from William of Orange, who was the original, Protestant crusader. So it's a very Protestant Catholic game. It's not really, but the history behind it is.
If you go, it's so bad in Northern Ireland that in Londonderry, and you got to say both because otherwise you're picking a side, right? They go back to 1690 when William Orange was going to attack that. He was going to liberate the city. The Irish Catholics were outside the city, and the mayor, this guy named Lundy, was going to open the gates and let the Catholics in. And a bunch of apprentice shop boys that had been sent there from London to go help run the shops, who were actually were Protestants, closed the gates, stopped the Irish Catholics from getting in, and held the city to wait for William Orange to get there. That happened in 1692 or whatever it was. They still burn giant piles of tires and have a parade every year, and it freaking matters which side you're on to this day when they have that celebration and they burn Lundy the traitor in effigy.
Yep. It's
so next time you're at your Notre Dame Tennessee game, you think there's a lot on the line. You may be right.
Spend a little bit of time in that part of the world, and you realize that combative nature of Southerners comes honestly to us, because the ethnic background of this part of the world matches up pretty cleanly to that part.
Have you been to Ireland?
I'm not. I've been to Scotland, and I've been to been to England. My sister lives in London, actually. So yeah, I know a lot about it. But it was funny. I was talking to a Irish bartender in New York the other day, and I'm like, it's really embarrassing that a guy named Timothy Kelly's not been to Ireland. But I
you've seen The Quiet Man. If as long as you like The Quiet Man, then that's all that really matters. How many times have you been to Ireland, Eric?
Ireland 4 times, Scotland 6 times. We're going back in August.
Just so you know, years ago, I told Eric one of my dreams was I hate to fly. I would like to go to Ireland, have a drink in a pub, play maybe a little rugby with a local rugby team and the green. And he sends me these pictures. This is like 5 or 6 years ago. He sends me these pictures of him in Ireland saying, hey, I'm like, that's kind of a jerk thing to do, man.
Yeah.
All the great golf courses.
Don't worry, I'll send you some more pictures when we go over there.
I'll shoot you pictures from Eastridge on the back deck. Let me know how that goes for you. What era, if you were to talk about history, and we won't spend a lot of time because I got one more topic I want to get to, but if you were to look at the history you study, and I don't care who answers it first, is there an era, is there a time frame of history that you like the best? Do you kind of dive into and go, I like that era more, or I really like studying that? Is it more the war side of things and years? How do you migrate to?
If I was going to pick a topic, it would be American military history. So the Revolution, War of 1812, Civil War, World War I, World War II, stuff in between. I'm a military guy. I was in the Navy for 5 years. My dad was in the Marines. I got an uncle who was a 2-star general, all that stuff. You've got a American hero in your family. I just love going into the history of that stuff. One big one for the Civil War for me is because of all the crap that happened here in Chattanooga. Just a ton of stuff happened here in Chattanooga. And I love reading American history, studying American history, and trying to figure out why a bunch of people who were neighbors that sort of got along, and they were all living close to each other, and we all spoke the same language and went to the same churches or similar churches, somehow we managed to convince ourselves that we would kill 600,000 of our fellow Americans over probably mostly slavery, but other cultural differences. What convinced a bunch of people in the same country to get that violent all of a sudden? And then to actually study what happened during that war is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. It's a fascinating era.
How about you?
Probably the area of focus that I find most interesting has to do with Scottish and Irish history, and basically Southern ethnography, white Southern ethnography anyway, because if you look at, there's a really great book called Albion Seed by David Hackett Fisher that talks about the thesis is that there are 4 basic folkways of American, that you can understand American culture through. And you can trace them back, not that, the dominant culture of early white America was certainly British, right? And so you can trace those 4 folkways to 4 areas of Britain. And then, so I read that book, it just fascinated me, and I jumped off into the Scots-Irish piece of that, and read a lot of what George MacDonald Fraser wrote about the borders, right? And Middlemarch, and the borders between Ireland and Scotland are a fascinating period because the armies just marched back and forth for about 500 years. And it was when the light bulb went on for me when I understand why Southerners, a lot of them live in mobile homes. The culture the culture of impermanence is so strong because it's ingrained that like,
pick up and go.
Caca happens. No, it's that somebody's going to burn you out within a close enough period of time that there's no point in investing in permanent real estate. And the culture is so based on warfare and combat and constant strife that you can see it in Northern Ireland, you can see it in Scotland, you can see it in East Tennessee. It's a fascinating period of history because I don't know of another area where a culture was so subjected to just constant violence for so long. It is the current thesis for why Southerners are just generally more combative than your average American. Yeah.
Did and you said you can draw in that book, you can draw a comparison directly to how it affects our politics,
For sure.
how it affects our perspective, even to this day.
Absolutely.
I find that amazing.
Yeah.
I find that amazing.
Yep, there's a lot of literature on it, and it's fascinating stuff. If you go and spend time in that part of the southern Scotland or northern England, or by extension, again, the plantation of Northern Ireland was essentially just a bunch of lowland Scots that they picked up and dropped in Northern Ireland.
And you listen to you talk about this, and Eric, yours about they all intertwine.
Yep.
They all intertwine.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They all go. So if you go back to your side of it, looking at the military history. Is there a particular, even inside that, is there something that you look at more closely? Is there a war? Is there something that you dive into?
Well, I told you already, I love getting into the Civil War, the war between my great grandmother would kill me if I called it the Civil War. She fussed at me when I was a little kid. She was from Southern Maryland, and she was a Southern Democrat. And you called it, to be polite, the war between the states. It was really the war of Northern aggression, the war of Southern independence, or just the war.
Yeah.
The what?
The war.
The war.
That's the way she said it.
My family was definitely the same way.
Hey, folks, don't forget, this episode is also brought to you by Team Monteith with Keller Williams. Find ChattanoogaRealEstate.com. So what's your political leanings? If I were to ask you, are you Republican or Democrat?
No.
Yeah, I'm the same way, man.
I'm a
love that.
libertarian.
Are you?
Yeah.
I would say I am.
You know
I'm
what
not a card-carrying libertarian, but I am neither Democrat nor Republican. I'll say I voted for Gary Johnson last election. So,
But you know what, though? I think, though.
I did too, and I have been a member of the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
I just haven't paid my dues lately.
Yeah.
Well, I just think that's, if you were to ask the same exact question, and I know you're not supposed to ask how do you vote, whatever. I think if you would have asked that same question 30 years ago, there would have been no hesitation. There would have been a lot of times people like, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. That's the way it goes. And people could politely disagree. I think the actions of the Democrats and the Republicans has shoved so many of the people in the middle that I personally think that they're dying for a third party.
Man, I've been arguing for third party since I was in high school. Literally wrote for the editor, wrote for the paper. And you know, the problem with a two-party system, and this goes back to Jefferson, right, is that it sets you up for this binary, what is really a cognitive distortion, right? It's either black or white. It's either day or night, and there's only
two
you look at it, you see it
perspectives.
in you see George Orwell's book 1984. Yeah, it's this or that. Pick one. Well, it's a false dichotomy. It's not always that way. And unless you have a third party to keep the other two honest and say, hey, no, it's a little bit of both, and there is another alternative over here, I don't see how either party actually functions well. Because
I don't think they are functioning.
Well,
I don't
of
think
course
they're
they're
healthy.
not. No, they're not.
Well, and then we have the problem of the two parties have been in power long enough that they've written the rules so that they are the only parties in power.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember the exact rules. It's been a while since I looked at it, but Tennessee basically has some rule that basically says in order to get listed as a libertarian on the ballot, you had to have gotten something like 10,000
Right.
votes in the previous election under your party name.
Yeah.
Well, how do you do that if you're not allowed to be on the ballot under a party as a libertarian?
It's almost like insurance companies writing
No.
rules.
It's almost like
I wanna
insurance companies
say-
writing the rules, and it's like the Democrats and Republicans deciding who can run against them.
That's right.
And that's it. And I want to say maybe, Eric,
It's two
you might
wolves
know.
and a sheep voting on what's for dinner.
All right. It may be Nebraska. One of them's got this weird unicameral legislature, but almost every other state legislature is set up to preclude the development of a third party.
Yeah, and it is Nebraska. I was just out in Omaha. They were pretty proud of that.
Yeah, they should
Yeah.
be.
Yeah.
It's a better system.
Although, from what I hear out there talking to those guys, the Republicans pretty much can do whatever they want to in their legislature. There's nothing stopping them.
Yeah.
It's very efficient for them to run around, do what they want to do because it's only got the Senate. There's no House.
You know, there was a time, if you'd have told a lot of our fathers or grandfathers that we were going to have the ability to communicate so much more. You know, if you could fast forward 30 years, sir or ma'am, and we're going to have the ability to communicate about perspectives and ideas from people all around the country and the world, they'd have been like, what a great world that'll be. I didn't think they would take into consideration that the character of human beings would be such that instead of using the opportunity to learn, I get to use the opportunity for confirmation bias. I'm just going to hang out with people that agree with me.
Yep.
I'm not going to open any articles that happen to. I'm just going to. I'm going to be sad face on that post. Right. I'm going to angry face.
If you see it at all.
I'm not going to read. I'm just going to read the headlines.
Right.
And again, you know, there's all kinds of push and pull from the media part of it to whatever. But I'm so disappointed in the people. I really don't. I mean, I think it's the political system, of course, and the parties, but they only do what we allow them to do.
Well, you're right. And so to some extent, it does go back to sort of Orwell's 1984, and it's and bread and circuses, right? If you keep people, it's the mushroom theory of management, right? Keep people in the dark and feed them, and you're right. So it's up to people to wake up and smell the coffee. And
I don't think we will.
Account.
I think if you go to social media right now and read it, I posted something the other day about, forgive people, be graceful, all these things that these funny quotes that people use. We all go to church, do all these things unless you disagree with me. Then I get to call you names. I get to I get to be mean then.
Well, so there's a really interesting article. I didn't post it, but I should have probably about somebody. I should be able to give them credit, but I can't come up with it. But it had to do with the supply and demand. But it was supply and demand of misinformation, and the idea was there's this huge supply of misinformation. The counterpoint was, there's also a huge demand for it. Like you said, for the confirmation bias. People have gotten, for whatever reason, and that really is a $64,000 question, boxed into these areas where they want to believe these certain things. And, the guys that won the Nobel Prize for Economics, Kahneman, from that Thinking Fast and Slow book, basically said that the biggest realization of our current age is that people think what they believe. They don't believe what they think. I hope I got that right, not reversed. But again, their beliefs are there's so much information out there now that if they feel a certain way, they can find the information to rationalize it.
I heard a comedian say, go to the, confirmwhatabelieve.com, whatever website that is. Because I think also in politics now, and Eric, you and I touched on it a little bit when you were on with me, it's tied directly into who I am. In other words,
right.
I am vested in being right, because if I'm wrong, then that means I have to reevaluate all the stuff that I've been taught.
Right.
All the stuff. My bumper stickers on the car may be wrong.
So this is my. I've squeezed this in, but I read a book called The New Localism last year. Changed the way I looked at things, because like if tribalism's baked into the human brain, then why shouldn't our tribe be Chattanooga? Right?
Oh yeah.
Why does it have to be left or right? Why does it have to be Fox News or CNN? We should be thinking of ourselves. We should be thinking local first, then state, then federal.
That's kind of how it's supposed to. I mean,
that's how it's supposed to be. Yeah.
Would you not agree?
I've got a law school professor that at this point in the conversation would start drawing out the Battle of Gettysburg on the board, and his point was when he talked about how a lot of the laws used to be local, then state, and the federal laws, they were superior to state laws, but it was only over a few specific topics.
Right.
And we talked about the Uniform Commercial Code, and he would teach a class in the UCC and how all the states ended up with similar rules and why we really are one big country. The United States used to be the United States are. It's now the United States is.
Right.
And he'd get to that point of the conversation. Well, how did we get like this? And he would actually do this very detailed map on the board, including here was the little round top, here was big round top, here was the 20th Maine, down to that level of how the South lost the Civil War, creating the pathway for the large federal government that we have today.
Yeah, and it's a shame because federalism, for lack of a better word, states' rights has gotten stained with so many bad things because states' rights used it for, to oppose the civil rights movement and things like that. But if you read if you're a strict constitutionalist, it's the United States of America. It's not the United States of America, right? It is states' rights we have gotten it flipped upside down.
We 100% have.
Yeah.
Back to the third party real quick. Does the Libertarian Party has it got potential to become a hard?
That's a different. It is an actual party.
Yes.
It actually has a convention.
I know
that
it
actually puts up candidates.
Yes.
And there is so much infighting with the Libertarian Party because it's basically the party of wild, crazy cats.
Yeah, that's right.
And you put all these people in with all these crazy different ideas, and they can't. Republicans will be practical. Democrats will be practical in terms of what does it take for us to succeed as a party despite our differences. Libertarians are like, you don't agree with me 99% of the time, then screw you. You don't belong in my party, and we never get anything done.
But I think that both parties have become that way, and I don't want to pick on the Democrats a little bit, but it's almost like the media coverage. I still think to this day, marketing and advertising is really what affects most of us because who gets all the attention? It's the crazy people.
Yeah.
It's the people on both ends that say the extreme thing. No planes and automobiles and trains. Well, they're going to get all the headlines. And over here, it's, whatever we got over here, come look at me. It's dun, 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 dun. And the people in the middle that actually have common sense ideas, They just get lost. They just get lost. And if your Libertarian Party would get it together, I'd probably vote for somebody.
The Libertarian Party was more organized and actually had some more control.
Well, Gary Johnson could have been a better candidate, but it drives me nuts to this day. Again, I was not a fan of either other candidate. I'll leave it at that for obvious reasons, or what should be obvious reasons. But if everybody who said, well, you didn't have a chance of winning, if everybody said that and actually voted for him, I mean, it's unreal. But
do you think good people will run in the way we're tearing lives apart right now? If you're a good person, would you run?
One thing that President Clinton got right. The politics of personal destruction scares out a lot of. You've got to have a very, very special background to not have it go through the scrutiny that happens. And there's just not enough people.
Well, the difference is
have that background
or not care. And you can say that for Trump. At least Trump
that's what I'm saying,
doesn't care.
But that's not going to get us. I don't know if that's going to get us the people that we want.
Probably not.
I also think, though, if you have anybody that's got a resume of any type of leadership, right now, both you guys, I could put out there. I only want to hear from people that have bad opinions or bad personal experiences. You're both going to have people filling pages up. And the reason is, anytime you've achieved something in life, we're not human. We're not perfect.
If you ain't racing, you're not crashing, you're not racing.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely right.
You're not going to get that.
But I think maybe if and look, I mean, nobody's all bad. I could sit here and, well, let me just say this. If one of the positive things about Trump having been president may be that it emboldens people to say, you know what, I don't care, right? I'm going to do it because I'm not running for Pope. I'm running for this office. And bring out your dead. Bring, whatever. I mean, how much worse could you do than what people have rolled out on Trump? And he just is rolling through it. I mean, to his credit, you got to say the guy's just maybe because he's a sociopath, but I mean, he's so you're right. That's got to change.
The worst election choices you guys know history better than I do. If y'all know of an election that had two worst candidates, let me know. Right. I can't picture a time when I was going.
I can't.
LBJ versus Nixon.
That could have been.
Then LBJ backed out. Left it was Nixon was going to get elected no matter what.
Hindsight's 2020. I'll just say that. Yeah.
I mean, we kind of knew the dirt on both of them going in. That's the problem with Clinton and Trump. Hey, let's wrap this up with this. Both of you are very successful businessmen, and I'm not going to do a whole segment on business. By the way, I would love to do one whole show on how to build a business with you two guys, because you both different industries, right? Completely different things, but you both have the same concerns on how to brand. How do you hire correctly? How do you handle cash flow?
Yeah.
How do you handle problems? All these things. But let's do this. I love books about business. And so instead of giving the typical, give me a piece of advice, I want a book. One of you guys have read, give me one book that you guys have read that's helped you either from a leadership perspective or building a business that you would give to somebody out there right now who may be, 10, 15 years younger than you guys looking at building or starting a business. Do you have a book?
The E-Myth.
The what now?
The E-Myth.
Okay.
The premise of it is that if you are a really, really good plumber, you're only going to be able to have so much time in the day to go do plumbing jobs around the neighborhood, around your town. And at some point, you can't keep up with all the demand for you, but you're always just going to be a plumber. You want to grow your business, you need to stop being a plumber. You need to learn how to manage 2 or 3 other good plumbers and eventually manage 5 or 6 other good plumbers. Then eventually get to the point where you're managing 10 or 15 plumbers by having 2 or 3 other guys who used to be good plumbers manage them. You always want to make sure all those plumbers are doing a great job for their customers, but you can't ever provide plumbing services for more than the freaking people you can provide service to 45 hours a week if you're doing all the plumbing yourself. It's about getting beyond doing what you do for a living and managing other people and eventually becoming a business owner instead of just a plumber.
Yeah.
And I know you've done that over the years, but do you ever find that there's a struggle or a danger of thinking in your head, I've got to replicate myself? Because you can't replicate yourself. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times people think if they don't do the things my way, the way I did them, they won't get to the end results. So I think you have to.
If you're really, really good at your job, you have to learn how to not micromanage and not have other people do exactly what you want them to do. You've got to learn that they can go figure it out on their own. You need to give them the freedom to do that.
As long as the goal's
but
the same,
but you have to make sure you have the right person in place. And that's the tricky part. If you have to micromanage too much, you have the wrong person. You want to be able to get people who can figure it out on their own and succeed, and you get out of their way. And one of the best pieces of advice I got from a friend that I work out with at the Y, Tack Caldwell, told me one time that his boss does a great job with him. He just calls him up every once in a while and says, "What can I do to help?"
That's awesome. That's good stuff.
And that's what you should be doing as a boss. Once you get the people trained, once you give them their head, once you give them a chance to figure out their job, My job as their boss, as the business owners, what can I do to help? What can I do to make this even better for you? Can I take some of the training off of you? Can I work on systems and procedures? Can I pick some cases that I'm going to really dig into so that you're not so busy so that maybe I can take a little work off while you're busy doing other stuff? But I don't want to have to do everything myself, because if I'm trying to do that for all of my clients, they're not going to get the full attention they should be getting.
All right, Tim.
I don't have a better one than that. I mean, I can't say it any better than that. I mean, I could give you a lot of books to read, but that's you pretty much nailed it.
That was a little disappointing, to be
honest.
honest. I was expecting
let me answer for him. The other thing I like is the Deming management method.
Yeah.
If you haven't read anything by Deming, you need to.
Even
if you don't agree with everything he says, you need to be at least familiar with the concepts. Total quality management, I think, is the name of the book. And he was a guy that came along after World War II and told the companies, hey, this is what you can do to be more efficient. And after World War II, the only factories left on the planet standing were the ones in North America. They didn't need to be more efficient. Right. Everybody else was rebuilding, so we could do whatever we wanted to. So he went to Japan and taught Mitsubishi and Toyota how to build quality projects by paying attention to their customers. They brought some of his ideas back. First Saturn was the idea that using some of his methods. But the key thing is always trying to get better. If it ain't broke, don't fix it is exactly the opposite of what he teaches. You're always trying to look at the data, look at the statistics, look at what your customers want, and figure out how you can improve your services and your product for the customers.
I told somebody, if you're not intentionally, I don't want breaking your company, but if you're not looking for the fractures and the time will do it on its own. Yeah. Time will break it. If you're not constantly trying to strengthen it up. And Tim, you can either tell it or I'll tell it. It's your joke that you told in the first podcast I did. Do you remember? I said,
I know so many dang jokes.
Okay, well,
tell me which joke it is, and I'll tell you.
I said, I asked you for advice for business owners about, give advice. And you said, well, I'll tell you my advice to young business owners about listening to people. Mm-hmm. For young ones.
The Vegas joke?
Yeah. Can you tell that joke? You don't have to.
I'll tell it. So the fella, is it the one where the guy goes, the voice in his head? Yeah. So guy's sitting around in the office one day, and a voice comes in his head and says, "Sell it all, take the money, go to Vegas. Sell it all, take the money, go to Vegas." And he just shakes it out. He's like, "This is crazy." He goes back to work. It just keeps speeds up and gets louder, and he's just losing his mind. He's like, I guess I got to do it. He puts his car on Craigslist. He sells it, and he puts his house on the market real quick, and he sells it. And he gets $300,000 in a suitcase. And he buys a ticket, and here he goes to Vegas. And he plane lands at McCarran Field, and about that time he's thinking, this is the craziest thing ever. And the voice comes back in his head and says, "Take the money, go to Bally's. Take the money, go to Bally's." He's like, I can't believe it, So he's like, it's real. And he gets gets a cab, and he goes to Bally's, and the car pulls up at Bally's, and he gets out, and his heart's speeding up, and the voice comes back and says, "Go to the roulette wheel, the roulette wheel." And he goes to the roulette wheel, and he opens up, click, opens up the briefcase, and puts the money out, and the voice comes back and says, "Put it all on red 22, red 22. He's like, oh God, he stacks up all the money on red 22. And around goes the wheel, and click, 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 click. The ball lands on, black 5. And the voice comes back and says, "Oh, So the point is, you have to be, the difference between vision and delusion is, I've talked about this with entrepreneurship all the time. You need to be checking your assumptions against friends and family all the time, and you need to be begging them to be honest with you. Because the other thing is, I hear all the time, is the American Idol syndrome. Everybody's seen an episode of American Idol where it's like, well, my grandmother told me I was great, and you better be sure.
I've used your joke and referenced you as much as humanly possible. But thank you very much for coming in. And if you guys would open to it, a show about business, I think would be stellar.
I'd love to do.
Because I think y'all actually, once y'all started talking about your businesses, I think there's things you both can share. Thank you for listening to During the Break podcast. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Thanks for listening to During the Break. If you like this episode, share it with your friends. If you have a few minutes, please rate and review the podcast on iTunes to help us reach a larger audience. Also, like our Facebook page and check out our website, duringthebreakpodcast.com. If I haven't asked too much already, join us again next time on During the Break.